Welcome to the night zone, hear the warriors speak. Life's the battlefield and we ain't feeling weak. From love to the game and the power we seek. Our voice is strong, breaking every peak. Talk of love and battle scars, everything that's real. From touchdown to sermon, you know the deal. Strength in every word we begin to reveal. Truth in every tale as our lives we unveil. Talk of love and battle scars, everything that's real. From touchdown to sermon, you know the deal. Strength in every word we begin to reveal. Truth in every tale as our lives we unveil. Protect and provide, we're knights in the fray. Nothing off limits, we got something to say. Life and love, fitness and fight all day. Guys Night Podcast, let's ride the wave.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Guys Night Podcast. This is episode 20, and tonight we're going to discuss a couple of things regarding, EMS, fire, and police in our local area. We had the pleasure today of spending some time out and watching the training that happens in a lake under frozen conditions, and somebody falls through. So tonight we were fortunate enough to have a couple of guys from the local departments with us. So Brad, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Dan, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. And then Evan, hello.
Hello, what's going on, guys?
And of course, David, thanks for setting this up tonight.
Yeah.
What's up, everybody?
Awesome, guys. Well, obviously, Guys Night Podcast, the idea is just to kind of sit around a table and learn some things from each other. And, I learned a lot today, like don't fall in the ice.
Yeah.
It's a good start. Step one.
It's funny because, you think that all these things are out there to save your ass if you fuck up, right? But then you don't realize what goes into it. And I definitely saw that today, the divers showing up. If you're submerged, yeah, they show up, but one, they have to get there. And then two, it's not like they just jump in the water in their shorts and t-shirt and like wring it out. So how long have you guys been working with this specific team? We can start with you, Brad.
Yeah, so I started our county water component started about 8 or 9 years ago. We focused strictly on surface water rescue and swift water rescue. So we've kind of slowly built the team out where we have swift water rescue technicians, and we're in the process now of adding the dive component. So it's been a process. The county all hazards team that we have has been in place since 1992, or I'm sorry, 90s. But there's a number of disciplines to it. So just like we saw water today, there's also confined space, there's rope rescue, there's trench, there's fire investigation, hazmat. So a number of different disciplines that do the same stuff that we do, but for those specific incident types.
Right on. Anything to add to that, Dan?
I'm not on the county team specifically. Last year I did get certified as an instructor for ice rescue. So this was my first class actually teaching, which was really a great experience, great students. At my full-time job, we are responsible for all those teams for the county. We do it solely from our department. So trench, confined space, structural collapse, all those types of things. So we have to be trained in all those components and ready to respond in any way that we have to. So getting involved with the county team might be something that I do in the near future. Seeing how today went, it went well. So
Yeah, it went really well.
Yeah.
Fantastic job. So you were orchestrated most of that then?
yeah, myself and our chief from our department.
So we're talking about a lot of different things, obviously. Why don't we have you guys each just tell us a little about yourselves, your experience with the teams that you guys work with, and your history with, these departments.
Cool. Yeah. So I started actually with the department that I'm on. I started as an explorer, and the explorer is run through Boy Scouts of America. It's actually like a junior fire program. So age 14, you can kind of tag on with department trainings, respond to incidents, and help with things. I did that, and then my last 2 years of high school, I went through the public safety program at our local career center. So when I graduated high school, I came out as a firefighter level 2, which is the professional firefighter certification in the state of Ohio, and an EMT basic. So I've been with the department officially since 2010, and then, like I said, the all hazards team about 2014, 15. Did a little bit with the rope team, and then we were kind of talking about it out there today too, but to be a water rescue technician, you also have to be rope rescue certified. So part of that training, I had to get the rope rescue certification first to be then a water rescue technician. So it's kind of, like I said, long process, but a ton of different trainings and stuff along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is it your full-time job?
No, so that's kind of one of the other cool things about the team and the way that we respond. Like today, a lot of our departments are part-time departments in this area. So they staff, a lot of them have people that are dedicated to respond 24/7, whether they're at the station or they respond from home, but this is a part-time job for me. So all of our department members are part-time. So we have guys who own landscaping companies. We have guys who work full-time in health insurance. We have guys who are full-time firefighters somewhere else. And then this is kind of their B or C job or D or
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a hell of a risk too. I mean, not only to the current career that you chose that's supplying, you know, your family with their living and everything else,
Yeah.
but then to risk your life on the side, you know.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is the time. I mean, you look at the class that we had today. Those are all individuals who took last Sunday and this Sunday away from their families, maybe their only day off, depending on where they work, what else they have going on. So a lot of time commitment that goes into it.
They seem like they enjoyed it though.
Oh yeah.
I saw them all playing in the water at the end. I'm like, you guys are crazy, but it does look like a good time. And Dan, your experience?
So like Brad, I started in the public safety program a few years before him. And then this is my 20th year on our department in the part-time aspect. I worked in the inner city for a little bit full-time, number of years, and now I'm at another city that has a rural component to it as well. And that's where the door really opened up for me for some of the specialized team training. So that's been great. But it's been a long walk for sure.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about a bunch of different certifications, but just so those who don't know, you guys understand, you guys are with fire departments, correct?
Yes.
So you mean you guys don't just run into buildings? You guys do other stuff too?
Yeah. So we most of our departments around here, and it's really a national model. Your bigger cities may have separated fire and EMS, but a lot of our agencies run fire and EMS. So we do the fire side of things, but we also respond to EMS calls. And honestly, EMS makes up 80 to 90% of really any of the departments and what we do. So the majority of our calls are somebody fell, somebody got hurt, somebody's having a heart attack. That's really the biggest component throughout the entire profession. Is EMS is very heavy unless you're at one of those departments that has a separate service that runs their EMS calls. We do both. So
Right on. You talked about a couple of different trainings, rope training or rope certified. What does that entail?
Yeah,
in
so
addition to
they all of those are kind of additional trainings in those specific disciplines. So the rope rescue technician course, there's again different levels of that course, but the rope rescue technician is it's a full course on specifically dealing with ropes, knots, different types of ropes. When do you use this rope versus that rope? What knots are the best for what situation? Hoisting and pulling. You can look on the news. I forget what year it was, but Medina County specifically, we had a water rescue or water tower rescue that was years ago. So that's the team that would show up. And you think about, you look at cell phone towers, look at anything else. When those guys climb up to replace antennas, replace anything else, stuff can happen to them too. Yeah. So it's really that team is trained to rescue individuals at height, regardless of what it is.
Maybe you just made me think of like all those like buildings in New York and stuff like that operate on those like ridiculously high incentives and like, you know, the ones where you watch the video and you look at it, you're like start to get dizzy yourself. You're like, hell with that job.
Yeah, places like that, they're doing it every day.
Yeah.
You know, the larger hazards that are going on and they're operating in that capacity every day. Here we may get, you know, 1 or 2 a year of you know, high intensity calls. But we're still training.
Yeah,
you know, twice a month.
Yeah, they have so like whip sledges in Hinkley. Not uncommon to get people who get out to a certain point on the ledge and then get stuck, can't get back to where they're at. So the rope rescue team gets called for those kind of things. Animals stuck in mud. That's another kind of incident that we've had around here where it's call the rope rescue team because we can create a harness for this horse that's stuck in mud,
right.
And that's happened more than once. So
a lot of horses.
Yeah,
a lot of horses.
Yeah.
And now, Dan, you're from today at least, you were in the training aspect of it. So have you become an instructor for multiple courses? Or is that kind of your career path? Or did this just kind of come to you as like an opportunity and you took it?
It was just an opportunity. I'm not a instructor in any other capacity, but the opportunity came up last year. There's a need for it, and so it was a long process coming. So we knew that there was a need for it coming up. So hey, get some guys in this class. This opportunity only comes up every few years, so got me involved with it. Our chief, I don't know how much longer he's going to be doing that stuff, so it's a good idea to get kind of spun up so that I can do it, hopefully, in the future in his place.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Maybe.
Some aspirations, maybe.
We'll see.
You've got the mustache for it.
Hell yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes comes and goes.
So obviously to become a trainer, the amount of time that you had to put into that, I'm assuming over this last year when you decided that, tell us about that process, what that was like.
So first, in order to get into that course, you have to become a technician, which I received it a few times over the past probably 15 years through our chief.
And what is become a technician specifically? Just
the course that we did today, you're just a student in it. So a 2-day course, and you have to have your EMT at least and fire certified, I believe, as prerequisites for it. So I got that, and then there was a 3-day course that came up last year for the instructor. So got into that.
It's kind of a neat way to, you think about teachers and they have all of those years of training of how do you teach different learning styles. And in our disciplines, that instructor, you have your education that's based on how do I rescue somebody from the ice? And then the other part of that class is how do I deliver this material to people? So you're taking people who are not teachers and making them into teachers so that they know how to share the information.
Yeah, I'd imagine that's got to be the tough part, obviously, too,
Yeah.
because a lot of young people out there today. Some of them, I'm assuming, is their first time doing anything like this, or the last couple of weeks. And they all seem like they adapted pretty well. Obviously, they're excited about it because it's training. It's not a real life scenario, and you get to do it with all your buddies and stuff like that. But hopefully, the repetitiveness is what makes it long term. But how did you guys? And here, let me get carried away. Let's talk about the All Hazard Team because I thought this was pretty cool. In the military, we had all kinds of coalition forces and stuff like that. You guys said this started in the 90s.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, this wasn't a budget that was there. That was something that started off of donations, I think you said?
Yeah, so they a couple of people from different departments recognized the need and they went to corporate donors and said, hey, we want to do this, but we need money to do it. So they got a number of corporate donations. It started off as kind of the rope rescue component first. And
so that was the original idea was
Yeah.
like, hey, we just need to be able to
need
cover
rope.
more space and we need more people
Yeah.
and more experience.
I think it resulted as a trench incident that it was kind of a impromptu rescue, and people didn't have all that training. So then it was like, hey, there's an actual need for this, and there's a lot of these incidents that go on throughout the county. So let's go to each department, get some donations, get this thing started.
Yeah, and the county at the time was much different than it is now. So as developments were going in, I can remember being a kid, and there was a development right up the road from me where they had a trench collapse. And so kind of watching that, and then years later learning, like Danny said, that's kind of the why. That was those incidents they looked at, and they would call, at that point we'd call neighboring communities, have other counties respond for that kind of stuff and help, which we still do. But it was like they need to have this stuff available to us here locally, especially as the community has grown.
And then since you guys developed this team, and it's not just made up of EMS and firefighters, right?
Yeah, so we have added a law enforcement component. Not really many of our other disciplines have law enforcement on board, but in the water aspect, we brought them on board. So our team leader, he was a career in law enforcement. And so when we have a dive incident, or when we have a water rescue incident, there's a lot of investigation that goes into it. There's a lot of evidence collection and stuff like that, interviewing witnesses, interviewing people. It's not as easy as, hey, I show up and they were in the water there. There's a certain way that you have to get that information from people. And so we brought law enforcement on board because they're professionals at it. They do that day in and day out. So law enforcement being on board has been a huge help. And then there's also the aspect of, you can talk to neighboring counties. There's crimes that are committed and then evidence is tossed. And so it's like, hey, we want to use the dive team to collect this evidence, and we can't just dive down, grab what they want, and bring it up to them and be like, here you go. You have to do it in a way that you protect that chain of custody so that it can be used downstream in court cases and whatever else. So
No pun intended.
yeah. Yeah. So adding them has been incredibly valuable. And then we also have the benefit in our county, most of the time, law enforcement's like anywhere else. Law enforcement's often the first ones there. So having them trained and understanding, this is the information that I need, this is the information that we need to know right away, they then can relay that to us and kind of streamline the entire process.
And so you said law enforcement, EMS, firefighters, anybody else that makes up this team, or?
No, that's pretty well encompassing. We do have some communications technicians through our county EMA who their job quite literally is to show up in all of our different agencies. For the most part, we're all on the same type of radio system, but when we start to get into other agencies responding, then it's like, okay, well, I can't just press my button on my radio and talk to you, and you can't press yours and talk to me. So how do we make that work? So we have a couple of our EMA volunteers that specialize in communications. So their job is quite literally to show up and set that piece of it up, which is incredibly important to any of the operations. So they show up and kind of manage the, how do we talk with each other? And then we've also had them involved in the rest of our trainings because they need to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how, so that they can help adapt that piece to it.
So we talked about a lot of these guys are part-time.
Mm-hmm.
Is the all hazard team a part-time team in the sense of like you guys still have your responsibilities to your other departments?
Yeah, so it's made up of members from all of our agencies here in the county. And ultimately what happens when there's a request, so like today that local fire department goes out, they get called for that person that's stuck on the ice. They make the call to our dispatch center and say, hey, we need the county all hazard team. And then we get dispatched separately, same radio system, but we have apps on our phones that they can send our dispatch text to. We get dispatched, and then everybody's coming from all of these different departments. So that's the other piece of it. When we're sending people for these, we're not sending our entire department, because I still have to worry about the emergencies that can happen back at home. So, for instance, our department, we have 3 of us that are on the water rescue team. So when we have a water call, we know, okay, those 3 members of our department aren't available because they're out at this incident. And then you have to kind of, again, you still have people having heart attacks, people falling down, car accidents, kind of where we're from. So
the logistics of that's got to be insane at some points, I would imagine.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of the training that goes into it is not only the deployment, but it's also like an ongoing policies, procedures. How do we make this all work? What's the best? I would be lying if I said that after every incident, there's not something that changes because we find, hey, maybe this will work better, or maybe that'll work better. So it's just really a continuous process of what's going to work best for the next time.
Right.
Yeah, there's also a large fire investigation component to the all hazards team, which that's probably the one part that gets utilized the most out of anything in the county.
Is the investigation aspect on why fire started type investigation? Or?
Yeah, anything that's questionable, any fatalities, any major loss, they are called right off the rip. And so you have representatives from all over the county as well coming for that.
So they're all part of that the all hazard team?
Yeah, it was right around 2018. They changed it to be individual teams, and they made it an all hazards team. And that basically streamlined everything. So if there is a hazmat incident, I'm not hazmat certified, but if there's a hazmat incident, we have the hazmat technicians that would go in and handle the actual spill or whatever else happened. But you need support people too. So just like our water rescue stuff, we need support people on the shores. I need people to help carry equipment. I need people to be there when we get in and out of the water. We need the extra hands. So having the all hazards component, we train individually, but we also can operate together. There's a lot of times where, rope rescue might be involved in a water rescue, or trench rescue and confined space are working together. So a lot of that kind of happens simultaneously.
How do you guys manage all the cross training? Because I'd imagine, like you said, the all hazard team is all these different people from all these different departments, and they're all certified on multiple different things. So, everybody's got to be prepared for every incident. So how do you guys get in these trainings, like the one we saw today? Because I can't imagine it's easy to get a bunch of part-time people all together at the exact same spot.
Yeah, so we'll usually put out like a press release when we want to put one of these things together a few months in advance. I don't know how early this one went on, but I know it was at least 2-3 months. As the season was coming up, it's like, okay, ice season's coming up. Let's try to get this thing started. Let's put something out. Hey, we're tentatively looking at these dates. Stay tuned for some updates, and then we'll set a date for it and see if we can make it work. And this one was actually funded by some funding from EMA. So leftover money that Emergency Management Agency had went to all this. So it was nice, so that all the other departments didn't have to pony up some money to take this class, because it is expensive. Like if you were to contact Dive Rescue International, who oversees all this stuff, it would be kind of costly.
Yeah.
So.
And they look at like a regional component training too. So we talked a lot about like the local piece, but we're also a part of a state region. And so a lot of the times, like for our water rescue stuff, we just had one that I think it was Tri-C put on. And so it kind of gets sent out to everybody regionally. And it's like, okay, we might have some guys from Cleveland. We might have some guys from Summit County. We might have some guys from Stark County that come up to do the training, because it just gets blasted out. It makes the most sense to do it that way, so that it's like, we don't need to do our own class and then you do your own class and you do yours. We can just do the training here and then y'all come.
So is this a model that other counties in Ohio or even nationally have taken to? Were you guys kind of a pioneer in this, or was this something you guys had picked up from something? Or?
No, it's pretty standard. A lot of agencies, the level at which it's built out is just dependent on the geographical area. So like Danny mentioned, his department, they kind of manage everything and handle everything on their own because they have the people for that. Your bigger municipalities, they can do that, where there's certain fire departments where one station of that entire department might be their water rescue station. So if you're water rescue certified and you're going to be the water guy for their department, you're always working out of that station. And then if we ever have a water rescue, we're always calling that station. So they kind of specialize that way. But the cool thing about
you're talking about bigger departments, bigger
Mm-hmm.
budgets, obviously, and more people.
Yeah, and so the approach that we take is pretty standard to do it like county based or regional based, because 70% or more of the nation operate the way that we do with part-time departments. The majority of fire departments in the United States are part-time departments. So it's a pretty standard makeup of teams, kind of tiered from fire department to county to regional.
How have you seen, since taking donations initially, right, and just kind of getting this off the ground? Have you been there since the beginning? Or
I have not.
You said
no.
2015,
Yeah.
right? And this started in the 90s.
Yeah.
Well, even since, early 2013, 14, 15, how much has it changed just over the last 10 years? Is it becoming, easier to get people? Is it becoming easier to do training? Is it becoming a more, are you guys picking up additional job duties in a sense on this team? I feel like it's like the SWAT team for the police department. Like you guys are this overall rescue team that's being built. I imagine there's some.
Yeah, and it comes in waves. Personnel is always a problem, getting people involved. I think the team director, he did a really good job of marketing, like, hey, this is what we have available to people that were new into some of the specialized training. And if you're interested, we'd love to have you. So there's always an invite for it, because we're always lacking personnel. But we've had some federal funding over the past 10 years, which has been really helpful. A lot of COVID money, I think, went to a lot of the EMA supplies and things like that.
Yeah, and the recruitment piece, that's always it's like any other industry, right? The generational thing hits, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's hard to get people. Danny can say the same, I'm sure. And like, I can remember when I started in the fire service, if you were to apply for a job with the fire department, for one spot, you would have 60, 80 applicants easily, maybe more. And so it was a testing process, and it was interviews, and there were guys that would take, Danny, how much did you go through going through the process?
I took a lot of tests.
Yeah.
I took a lot of tests, and some of it was just to be on a list to be hired, and you'd have 400 people show up for just that. Now you're lucky on a department that say has maybe 40 members to get 10 people that are interested to take your test.
Wow.
To sign up. So it's been a problem over the past few years, and I think that's just a cultural change nationally. No, we need hard chargers. We need people that are ready to take on great responsibility, and that's kind of been something that's kind of gone by the wayside, in a lot of different ways, not just public safety. So
No, I agree. And obviously, I mean, well, and there's more to it as well. It's funny because you mentioned a list. When I first got out of the military back in '05, like I feel like in the rural areas, like you had a truck and you worked for the fire department, like part time. Like that was like the rules in like 2000 and 2005. And it was the same thing. There was a list. The guy, like I went to Lafayette Fire Department. He's like, there's probably 200 people that have already applied. We're trying to pick somebody next week. You're a little bit late in this process, as you know, whatever. But today's day and age, you mentioned the career center. Do you guys get many people from that aspect that take that journey? Because that sounds like a really great journey for a young kid.
it's awesome.
It's phenomenal. And both Danny and I sit on the advisory committee. So we've kind of been able to help see what goes out of it. I teach there
At the
evenings,
Medina
for
or?
the adult program. I teach up there still, help out with the high school program. It's a different. It's hard to find people that know that that's what they want to do so early on. And I feel like, even when I went through school and you were a couple years ahead of me, but there was that was when that push was like, everybody has to go to college. Everybody has to go to college, and vocational education kind of took the back seat. And I think we're starting to see more of the switch now of like, oh, hey, this is a really good option too, And so they still have people lined up to get into the program. But it's a matter of how many of them are following through after and getting a career in it. How many are making a career of it? That's the challenge, is that it's not easy work. It requires a lot of time, requires ongoing training. I mean, I haven't quit training since I started. And
Of course.
It's endless.
You have to have people that want to do that and recognize that.
I think that's an issue with a lot of jobs that require ongoing work, is that nobody wants to do that anymore. Time's more valuable, apparently, than it was 20 years ago.
Well, and it goes the same way in public safety. Like, it comes in waves. There's times where I've loved the job. There's times where I haven't liked the job.
Of course.
So you have to continually refine and get that motivation, that self-motivation back to keep progressing.
Now,
it's hard to do.
It's funny you guys both mentioned, obviously, did you go through the Career Center program as well? So we've had this conversation quite a few times on here for different positions that people hold that we've had talked to. And, to now the Career Center is like a golden ticket to really feed your life. I think when I graduated in 2000, and it was where all the stoners went, is how I always looked at it.
Yeah, they used to call it the joint.
The joint.
Yeah. But they've obviously done quite a bit. My daughter actually just applied. She's gonna go to the Career Center, and there was a line out the door on their early enrollment the other night. So it's great to see these kids kind of take a different outlook on maybe their future. One of her friends, I think I've mentioned on here before, she said, it's different at the Career Center. Everybody wants to be there, and the teachers love what they're teaching because they excite it. So it's it's just a different culture and for learning. And more importantly, even if it's not what you decide to do for the rest of your life, it's experience that and a skill set that you can use either in a different job or while you're looking for that career field.
Yeah, for sure. I think the best thing that you can do is explore something and see that you don't like it and move to something else, because you don't want to force yourself into something that you don't like. You're going to be unhappy for eternity.
Now, you mentioned you've worked on some larger fire departments. Do you notice a difference in the sense of, when I think of like movies about fire departments and stuff like that, like it's my dad did this, so I'm going to do this. Kind of like my dad's a cop, I'm going to be a cop. Do you notice more of that in those bigger departments, in the sense of like, I'm trying to think of the word, but like kids wanting to follow their father's footsteps? And then do you see that same thing out here, or is it?
Yeah, I think in our area specifically, I'll talk to that first. I think we have a decent amount of that, and a lot of our departments, they started as volunteer departments. They've grown now because of increased population and increased call volume. But we see a lot of families that are involved because they view it as service to their community, and that's why a lot of our departments were, back when they were started, was the farmer down the road if he heard it, yeah, I can go. Or the grocer, our department was the local grocery store was the chief for years, and so there's that component of it, I think, in our area that we have, that it's like I can give back to the neighbors that I have, and I can respond and help them when they need, and it's not that bad to do. And then obviously, Danny, for the bigger departments.
Yeah, I work with a number of people whose fathers were firefighters as well, even on the same department. And yeah, I've seen a lot of that over the years, which is great. It's so cool to see. But a lot of times when you're that person going into the position, you have big shoes to fill, or maybe somebody didn't like your father. And it's like, okay, now you really have
Either
big
helps
shoes
or it
to,
hurts.
I 100% see that. Yeah.
whatever the situation. So
Or your dad's the chief.
but there's a huge tradition aspect to our service because of that. And ultimately, you have to have a want to serve. And it's a great vessel to do so,
It's also, it becomes a family in and of itself. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I've literally known Danny since I was 14 years old. And so
Yeah.
we kind of, you work with these people, but you go through every phase of your life with them, and you see some of the darkest things, you respond to some of the worst things, some of the funniest things, smelliest things, whatever it might be.
Yeah, of course.
And so
Wettest.
it's a lot like, it's a lot like, when people describe military experience, I was never in the military, but it's a lot like that. Like we know that if things were to go sideways, I know that I can count on him, because I know that we're not just like, hey, we show up and we clock in together. It's like, holy shit, I've known him since he was in high school,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and when you go through these trainings and stuff too, that camaraderie is like not replicated in the office environment when you're
Right.
sitting at a bunch of desks. Like, yeah, you get to know everybody, you get to communicate, but there's something different when you're actually pulling something out of frozen water, or you're sitting there struggling. I'm sure you guys do crazy stuff for physical training, going up and down steps and chairs or ladders and stuff like that. Like when you suffer through training physically, like there's a bond there.
Yeah.
That's it's completely
And the
different.
competition, you got to want to compete with each other, and
Oh, absolutely.
that's what builds your relationship, your team building, and there's definitely a lot of that.
So when it comes to the training and stuff like that, obviously with part-time, this is probably more difficult, but you guys are obviously in great shape. How do you guys manage the physical fitness of especially your part-time and volunteer people?
Well, what you do in your off time is what prepares you for your on time, is the way that I always look at it. And like early on in my career in the full-time aspect, I realized, I have some work to do. And if I want these guys to respect me, if I want to forge my existence, I have to do a lot of things on the side to get ready for it. So like yesterday, I ran 5 miles yesterday. I do a lot of running in my off time, biking, stuff that tries to challenge my mental fortitude, my physical fortitude. And you have to stay on it. It's perishable. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah,
type
for
of thing.
sure. Do you guys have a hard time keeping like what happens as a volunteer? Like, is this somebody you're like, hey, we're gonna have to part ways or do anything like that when it comes to?
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, let's be honest. I'm sure there's some guys at home that are eating Twinkies and drinking soda pop, and,
Right.
And then show up at the fire and they become the weakest link.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of you have your aces in their places. Like when you show up, obviously the idea is that everybody is able to do every job and able to do it completely competently. But there are also people that you know where they're going to be better. So if you have somebody like, I'm not going to put Danny on a truck running a pump. I'm going to want him inside pulling people out. I can put one of those other people on the pump, and so we have to kind of manage. Both of us being officers, that's a big part of what we do as well, is managing where people are. Sure. And it's important not only for us and for the patient, the victim, whatever, but it's important for their safety too. There's certain departments that have every year it's physical, or you get this. There's whether it's a bonus incentive or something like that, but it's not really, especially in areas where you're hurting for part-time employees, you're hurting for volunteers, you're hurting for people to come and do the job. As much as you'd like to say, hey, sorry, can't cut it, that person might also be the best medic that you have. And it's like, hey, if I have an EMS call, this is the person that I want there to help save a life. So you have to, it's a balance of kind of what can you do and also kind of encourage that culture of changing it. And one of the things that our department did, I think last year, we had a bunch of guys that came up with a combat challenge, basically, that was like that was their competition. So there were a few people that I was like, I don't even think that they'd be interested that did, and it was good because it was kind of like, all right, well, I saw you doing it, so yeah, I'll jump on and do it. And then it got them to train a little bit more than they ever did.
Oh, it's time for candy.
Well, good thing we got EMS here.
Well, look at the time.
Look at the time. No, it's opposite. No, we're good. We're good.
Gosh.
I'm gonna shut that
Yeah,
off
if
right
you-
now.
If you don't have, people that are cutting it, you have to look at yourself and what am I not doing to provide the means for this person to succeed? And I don't want to just cut somebody or push them away if I'm not doing my part. I think, you have to exhaust yourself when you're doing that, because at the end of the day, you don't want to go away from that situation thinking like, I could have done this, I could have done that, but I didn't.
Yeah, and I think that's an issue with leadership in general in the world we live in. I think leaders used to be more of hands-on, like reviews, set people up for success, come up with action plans, hold them accountable to it. Now it's just either we'll get rid of them because that's the easy thing to do, and
Right.
there's less and less people to replace them with.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that's just a culture of leadership that's developing out there right now. But, it's good to hear that there's still teams out there that say, hey, I got to look at myself. Like, what am I not doing to help them realize how important it is to do this or for this training?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to mold people, and like I look at myself when I was young, like I didn't have it, I had to make it. And I had to have other people there to help me make it. And so now I have to be that person that helps, people build the skills that they need to.
Now, I'm asking a little question. What did you think about one of the topics? Like, you remember the fire in California they were burning it? What would you think about one of the responses about the fire chief said? What did she say that one time?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
like, oh my, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I'm like, she said, why
You
am
mean
I-
as far as the budget and the personnel?
Yeah, the budget, the personnel, and when she said, "Oh, why am I going to pull you out?" What was it?
Oh yeah.
I was like, "What? Isn't
Yeah.
that?"
What was it? It was,
I forget the exact.
She made a
statement
comment about like if you were
You're
in
in
that
a
position,
fire.
it was your fault.
Yeah,
or like
you
something
shouldn't have
like
put
I was
yourself in
like-
that
yeah.
position
like-
in the first place. It's like, yeah, well, people are going to do that.
Okay,
you know?
when I-
Can't be
when I did-
surprised.
yeah, people are stupid. Yes, that we all know that. They're going to put themselves in that scenario no matter what. You're going to have one of those people that are going to either go back for their dog, or they're going to want to go back in their house for their memorabilia or whatever.
Right.
And then not get smoke inhalation and pass out somewhere. And you're going to have to drag them out. But again,
And that's a cultural problem for them.
Yes.
Like,
that's what
the hierarchy there has developed obviously some culture where that's their attitude with things. Like, I really can't speak on it
Yeah,
too much because
no.
Right.
I'm not a part of them.
Yes,
but,
yes. And you don't know the whole scenario.
right.
No, yeah, I totally get
but
that.
bureaucracy is never something that's really helpful to
No.
core mission values that
Mm-hmm.
public safety services.
Well, bringing up that David's actually going to California, I think next week, right? You leave Tuesday?
Yeah.
I'll be out there all next week, and it's going to be an interesting contrast because like what we saw today, and we're out there with, like, there's no ice in California except in the cocktails. That's about it. Like, but so it'll be interesting. I will be spending some time in the burn areas but I guess one comment that I have, and I was looking at some other videos of that incident, right? So at this point, I'm not there yet. We're all just kind of armchair quarterbacking all of our commentary about all the stuff going on out there, but. People were commenting on the level of National Guard, and then literally every law enforcement agency in Southern California has resources around all the burn areas. And so some people are talking about, well, this is communism. They're blocking us from going to our own properties and this, that, and the other thing. But there was one, we'll call him journalist, that got hurt while he was there, and then went from, and this can happen with, first responders, but this is a journalist who thought, oh, I'm going to, I got a story here to tell. And then They did save him, but he's, I think, still in the hospital. But, you know, that's also a component of this as well, is like securing a scene to where you're not adding victims into the emergency. So, you know, which is, you know, I guess another thought of people that are, you know, doing this, whether, you know, they're police or fire, and, you know, why you may have to be the bigger adult in the situation to make decisions, like to block people from even returning to their own homes in this case, where, you know, it's just as they've had people that, you know, now have tetanus because they've been stepping on nails. And then they had this guy who's hospitalized with, you know, a broken leg. And, like he sat out there, I think, for a little over a week before someone found him. So he's lucky to be alive, literally. But
Well, actually, I do have a question about that. So obviously you guys are familiar with, you know, some of the natural disasters, Maui being one of them, and those people not being able to return to their homes even now, 2 years later. How does, when that happens and they talk about the ground not being, you know, whatever the case might be, not ready, not able to be on, why is that still dangerous? And maybe you guys can answer this, but years after a fire, even just a year or 6 months after a fire, what are the risks of, you know, these significant fires and what they do to the habitat and the environment, and that maybe we don't hear about because people don't ask?
Well, something that large scale, I really have, I really can't say too much about it, but any large hazard like that, I mean, you don't want to allow people to go back to them prematurely before you've done all your due diligence to secure those areas and make them safe again. Like I even think of like Katrina. I mean, it was years before people were able to go back to some of their communities because of some of the hazards that existed. I've never been involved with that large scale of incident, so I really can't touch on that. But I mean, I can say like a simple house fire. You know, we don't let people go back in their homes to live there after a house fire because of the smoke conditions that cause damage to their belongings. You know, you'll continually breathe that stuff in. So we contact restoration companies that'll come in, they'll clean, you know, every cloth, every picture frame in your house, every wall,
Really?
so that you can get your house back into a living condition.
So even that small kitchen fire with all the smoke and stuff that's filling that it's that is actually attaching itself to other things in the homes and making it unlivable.
Yeah, I mean, my grandma we had a fire underneath of my grandma's house, and she was out of the house for 2 or 4 months because the problem is all of our stuff is synthetic material anymore. So it burns, and then those carcinogens just seep into everything. I mean, it's the same reason that we wash our gear after those fires. Culture change has been so much that we don't even put our gear back in trucks after them. They're supposed to be in separate compartments if we absolutely can, until it can all be decontaminated, because they found years later, after how many in our profession have had occupational cancer, they found so many years later that, hey, this is actually what's causing it. So I would imagine, and again, purely speculation, but I would imagine that has to do something with it, is that all of that stuff is just soaking into the soil, I'm sure, just like it can in any of the houses. So
yeah, that makes 100% sense.
Yeah, I mean, like Danny said, pictures off the wall, clothing. Her fire was in the basement. Clothing that was in dressers on the second floor had to go and be washed and cleaned before it could be worn again.
Hey,
So
how did that fire start?
yeah, that was a
No, we don't have to tell that story.
Wait, there's a story behind this fire.
It was an undetermined fire.
Good thing the fire station was relatively close to that
very
house.
very close, walking distance.
You know,
Yeah, I can't imagine a large scale communities like that. I mean, you think everybody's household cleaners, you know, burned and seeped into the soil.
And then we dilute it with millions of gallons of water.
Yeah.
And the runoff and
Yeah, I'm sure there's extensive soil testing and all sorts of things that they'll have to do before they can actually rebuild on that property. You know,
That's
it's not so
insane.
simple as just putting the house back up.
Is that so? All of those things, I guess, just for public knowledge out there. So like in the case of Cali and Maui and all of them, like the neighborhoods are just gone. So the stuff, I mean, all of that ash and everything that's just sitting there, like that could be deadly if you inhale that, if you're out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. You have
I
to get
guess I
that
didn't-
stuff out of there and
That's
I'm
that's
sure
a
there's a
project on its
process.
own. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's crazy because I mean, I guess obviously you realize everything burns up, but you don't think about. I mean, big news right now is RFK, right? Talking about all this different stuff that's in all these things, and it's like food that burns up all these different things, and what these things do or how they change under heat and fire, and yeah, that's good. I guess I didn't think of it in that sense, but it makes it a little bit more understandable, I guess.
yeah.
in
How
this
many
scenario.
cars are there? You know, I mean,
Oh, yeah,
cars
yeah,
are
yeah.
just toxic.
Gasoline, oil,
Melted
boxes.
tires.
Yep.
Oh my God! All the burning oil, all that stuff.
So, actually, when I was in Montana, I had to witness multiple of these fires. Have you guys ever taken part on one of those, or have you ever done any kind of training or thought about it at all? It's just a
No, I mean, we don't get large scale wildfires. We get, there is a brush season. We do have a burn ban in place from, was it,
October to March. It's October to March,
yeah, October to March.
where there's no not allowed to burn in the state of Ohio. It's like October, November. I believe that December is included, but you can't burn between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And it has to do with the underbrush and the wind conditions and all kinds of things. And those are historically when we get our hey, there's a bonfire that got out of control because people are burning during the times that they're not supposed to, and so all of that stuff that really nobody would ever think of.
I mean, I didn't. I
Yeah.
thought they were going to say like June to August.
And it's a blanket policy across the state. I mean, can you burn during those times? It's all dependent
Nobody's
on
gonna-
the conditions and what's around you,
Right.
like what you're burning, how big you're burning, like.
Yeah. Are you doing it in a basement?
Yeah, it's a big one. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's
So yeah,
all
we'll
year.
get we'll get like field fires and things like that, and some woods that catch on fire, and that definitely has its own hazards. And we have some specialized equipment for that as well. But Ohio really doesn't have anything too bad. Although this past year in southern Ohio, it was super dry, and there was a blanket burn ban for basically the southern half of the state for many months for all hours, no matter what. So that was interesting. That was the first time I've ever seen that, and that was just because it was such drought conditions.
Yeah, I was going to say when I was in West Virginia, I saw a couple of the signs that were up down by the trails and stuff down there that they were from earlier because we just had a huge storm down there after the last time, but that was what the case. It was like we hadn't had rain. It had I think no rain in 21 days.
Yeah.
Don't start a fire or something like that, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. Global warming, I guess, but then it hesitates to drop a bunch of snow. And that's another thing. We talked about this training, how important it is. The weather in Ohio hasn't been what it's been in the past. It's got. You guys got fortunate in the sense that you had some temperatures. You had ice on a lake. I haven't seen that. I feel like in 2 years.
And it was good ice.
It was really good ice. There's
Yeah.
30 of you guys, I feel like, on there at one point.
And it's actually kind of a disadvantage when you have ice that good. It's really good for teaching purposes, but it's not as realistic for a call.
You're
Like
kinda
nobody's going to fall into the ice in those conditions when the ice is this thick. you know?
right.
I was thinking you guys are probably hoping one of you guys is fall through and stuff.
Well, I thought it was going to happen at
that's
one
what I was
point. I was
wondering.
like, there's a lot of them out there.
I'm like, one of them's got to fall through.
Right,
Come
right.
on.
Especially
Oh,
when those
super
divers
thick.
walked out there and there was like 6 or 7 of them walking out. I'm like, that's a lot of weight. That's like
Yeah.
1,500 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even just from when we had the classroom portion last week to this week, regionally there was a number of incidents that happened because it did warm up. So you get shore melt. I know in the lake, guys who went ice fishing, they got on big chunks of ice that went out into the water, and then they had to get rescued. So that happens every year on Lake Erie. One of the park rangers tell me down in Kilbuck Lake, there are people still out there fishing, and they had like 4 or 5 feet of shore melt. So it's like,
Oh, yeah, you're stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not fun.
And that's like the training becomes real because when people go out to play on the ice, they're not doing it when it's so cold outside it freezes your face the second you get out. So they wait for it to warm up a little bit, and then what they don't think about is when it warms up a little bit and it's the 35 32 degrees and it's like, okay, yeah, this is warm enough. I can throw my jacket and go play on the ice. That's also when the ice starts to melt. So they get out there, and then that's when the ice has started to melt a little bit, even though they think it's rock solid. And that's when people fall in. The other big thing that we have is animals. We rescue a lot of animals from the ice because if we don't, somebody else is going to go out there and try to get them, and then we're rescuing a person from the ice. So that's kind of all of the training piece. And Danny mentioned the shore melt. So when these ponds freeze, they freeze from shore to the middle, and then when they melt the same way. The shore is going to melt first and make its way in, and so it's like you can get those areas that they look okay, but it's actually thin ice, and so then that's when people fall in. So
you know how fishermen are. I mean, they're diehard.
Yeah.
They'll go out and they'll do anything they can to get out there. So
Yeah,
I get
no
it.
kidding.
You know.
Let's talk about that process, though. I mean, you've been on a couple of live calls then in regards to ice.
Yeah.
What is that typical response? Because that was the first thing I noticed. Like, I don't want to fall on the ice because the response time can only be so fast. Especially, I know you guys are trying to develop a team here in Medina County, but as of right now, Wayne County holds your guys', or is it Worcester in general?
Yeah, so Worcester Township, Wayne County's dive team, we have a memorandum of understanding with them that basically any of our water calls, we call them for the dive component. So one of the things, Danny and the other instructors hosting this class, it's incredibly important because, to your point, that is incredibly time sensitive. So when we get a call for somebody that goes through the ice, we rely on that local fire department really to make the grab. We rely on that local fire department to get there within minutes and pull that person out of the ice, because in all reality, it only takes minutes before that cold water at 28, 30 degrees is stopping you from being able to grab onto things, stopping you from being able to think and listen and follow directions. So even if we get there and say, hey, do this, you could be so hypothermic at that point that you can't follow simple commands. So getting this training out to as many people at these local fire departments is really the goal because of that. So that's why the class is held, because there was an incident here in Medina County not long ago at River Styx Park, where a gentleman was out on the ice, went through, and the local fire department showed up and pulled him out. We were still on the way. So the way that kind of cascades is we'd get a call, hey, there's somebody on the ice that fell through, and ideally our water team would be activated really with the initial dispatch, because while the fire department who has people there and is going to the scene, we're coming from all of our different departments throughout the county, going to our EMA station to grab our stuff and then go to the scene. So there's an extra element. So we tell people, when you activate any of the teams, you could have 30 minutes or more for our team response. So that's why the local fire department really has to manage that incident until our specialized teams get there. So once those specialized teams get there, again, depending on what the incident is, yeah, that could be too late. And if that person has gone under, so one of the other things that we put in place is we call Worcester Township for their dive component right away. I would rather have them started, rather have them on the way. I can always tell them to go home, but we call them right away. And we're very lucky in this county. We have a lot of different agencies, but everybody works really well together, and they don't really look at like, hey, what shirt do you have on today? It's just, hey, we've got this job to do. So nobody really hesitates to make that call early. Whereas, it's not about jurisdictions. It's not about boundaries. It's just about, hey, you need us, we're going to be on the way, and we'll come make it happen. So, but yeah, that's the importance of the classes like this one today is we need the local fire departments to make that happen. There's a rule in like water rescue, and it's like the 1-10-1. I'm going to mess it up, but it's like you have 1 minute to control your breathing. So if you're on the ice breaks and goes through, you have 1 minute to control your breathing. And that's just because that initial cold shock of, think about an ice plunge or anything that you do.
Yeah,
it's that initial like, holy shit, it's going to take your breath away. So you have like that first minute is control your breathing, 10 minutes for your self-rescue. And 10 minutes for a self-rescue doesn't sound like it's crazy long, but 10 minutes is not a lot of time when you're trying to figure out how the hell am I going to get out of this hole, right? So, and
especially
then
if you're at like the 7 or 8
Yeah.
minute mark,
then that's when every body system is affected. Your hands, muscles, everything. You can't function it. You truly might not be able to move your arms, your hands to do anything. And then again, brain, comes in and you're not thinking about anything because your body's response is keep me alive. So all that blood is shunted to the core. And then the last one is like an hour is about what they say for hypothermia. And like, that's kind of the cutoff of when do we talk about rescue versus recovery, depending on the temperature of the water is also a lot. So if that person were to go under, if we couldn't get to them in time, or by the time we got there, they went under, they weren't able to keep themselves afloat. We have to look at it as, okay, is there still a chance that I could resuscitate this person if I pull them out of the water, or are we in recovery mode? And recovery meaning they're presumed to be deceased and we're just trying to pull their body out, because that also changes how we operate as first responders, because I'm going to do a lot in rescue mode when there's potential that I might pull you out alive still. But when we're in recovery mode, it kind of is it's a mentally hard spot to be in at times, but we kind of have to take that step back and go, how do I keep everybody safe
Well, I was
and
gonna say
still execute this? Yeah.
that recovery mode versus what did you call the rescue mode?
Yeah.
It's probably a lot more like what risk are you going to take in
100%.
as a team?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that changes.
For sure.
There's truly times where we start off rescue mode and then we kind of have to, okay, we're at this time. Let's get everybody together. Let's gather our thoughts, come up with our plan. Everybody's good. Yeah, you're good. I'm good. Okay, now we can move forward with this, and we have to draw that line because, again, ultimately at the end of the day, these are people that left their families to come and help. So we need to make sure that they can get back to their families at the end of it.
It's no different with a house fire too. Like,
Yeah.
if you're searching for somebody and while you're trying to put out this fire and it gets to a certain time marks, conditions get to a certain point, and it's like, okay, somebody's got to be the adult and be like, okay, we're going to focus more on putting this fire out than rescue, because we're kind of past the point of rescue.
And those got to be some tough decisions to make. I'm assuming
Yeah.
in most cases the chief's making those, or whoever's in in charge in the
Yep.
scenario. But and I'm sure they catch some scrutiny on some of those decisions too.
Yeah.
And obviously you have family that's involved, especially in a fire.
Sure.
Sitting outside wanting you to do more,
Yeah.
and not understanding the risk or the inept ability to do something.
Yeah, and we all wish that we could save every single one,
Of course.
but we have to draw that line between that kind of reality and have that understanding of, okay, but if I know that this fire is too far gone and I send somebody into it because we want to try to pull somebody else out, and if I'm in charge and Danny's going in, that's now on me. That death I have to live with too, and so it's a difficult situation, but you have to kind of take everything into account and conditions, where's it going, how much has it changed since you've been here, and that's amongst any discipline really. Like you said, from fire to ice rescue to hazmat stuff, anything is the risk a lot to save a lot mentality.
Yeah, and all those lessons have been learned over time in the past from various scenarios where people have failed to see that, hey, we need to stop and change our plan a little bit because we've lost A, B, and C person, and we have NIOSH reports that we review, which they examine any fatal firefighter fatality incident, and there's an entire comprehensive investigation that goes into those. And routinely for training in-house, like, we go over some of those things, and we learn the lessons from them. It's you're walking on the shoulders of giants because of those incidents that have happened in the past. So
Yeah, and I imagine obviously there's training on that as well as you become a leader and you start learning about these things. But then there's also the human aspect of it, who everybody thinks they could be that last guy to run into the building and make that hero save, and it's got to be tough. Like, I don't envy that job at all that you guys still do.
yeah, you can't make those decisions based on emotion, which is a hard thing to do.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's why the best part about it is that we're never alone in it. We have a team of people, and we have that team because I might be more emotionally connected to this specific call and be willing to do something maybe that I shouldn't, where then I can look at somebody like Danny that's working with me and be like, no, get your shit together. This is what we need to do.
Unfuck
No, we're
yourself.
not doing this. It becomes a lot of all of our heads together to go, okay, where are we at? How do we move forward from this?
And working together in these teams, you put faces to people, and you were at a training a month ago and you saw that this guy does this, and now you're on an actual incident, and be like, hey, I know that guy knows how to do this, so he's going to go do that. And that's just a result of repetition and practice.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm much like the military. I'm sure not only do you guys I talk about all these different trainings and stuff, but when it comes to your gear, how often is that stuff tested, and what does that process look like on a multiple different levels?
You have a responsibility to inspect your stuff all the time, but we do have routine timestamps where we go and do gear inspections, that type of thing. But ultimately, it's on you. You see something that's screwed up, you need to notify somebody, get it remedied, keep moving.
Yeah, it's not one of those things you could put off.
No,
right? Because that bell could go off 30 seconds after you notice something, and you're just stuck.
So we have our trucks, for instance. Everything on our trucks, all the equipment, everything is checked weekly, taken off, motor started, small engines started, make sure that they're full. So every department has kind of a different cadence. One department that I worked for, it was every morning. So it was like, we never know when it kind of got used last, returned, and make sure that it got cleaned up the way that it should. And then down to our structural firefighting gear, those are also only good for a certain period of time. So like 10 years, then we have to replace all of that gear, which is expensive, but there's only certain time frames really for all equipment that has its usable life.
Right.
Because then you can't, you look at the ropes today. These ropes are, we have good equipment and it's in good condition. But if we were to use that rope out in the ice cold water, and then it freezes, it expands, it freezes, it thaws.
You're dragging it over the
dirt, mud. Yeah. And so we have to take really good care of it for that reason, make it last as long as it can. But there's also just a component of it's doing its job. When does it need to be replaced? It's like tires on your car, right? You can't just drive them until one blows.
I mean, you could.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we've got about 30 minutes. I know you got a hard stop tonight because you have kids.
Yeah.
Kids?
No
kids.
Not that I know of.
How do boys, girls?
One of each.
One of each.
Yeah.
How do they look at Daddy the firefighter?
It's hilarious because they don't really think it's just normal to them.
Yeah.
So they don't think much of it. They love to go to the fire station. They love to see the trucks. They're interested in it all. But being in public safety, so their mom is a police officer, and so the two of us, with the mentality that we have, our kids view things differently. When other kids they still obviously had learned numbers and letters and stuff, but our kids were also like, okay, what's your address? What's mommy's name? What's daddy's name? How do you who do you call if you have an issue? There was just that extra level of because we're used to seeing the worst of the worst. So,
of course.
But yeah, so to them, it's normal. They don't know anything else. And when their friends are like, you do what? And it's like, yeah, dad's a fireman. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Now, what about, what was I going to ask? When they see movies, do they correlate the two? When they see, or do you guys try to keep them away from some of those?
They're young enough that they're not seeing anything anything crazy at this point. But
I didn't even ask how old.
Paw Patrol,
Paw Patrol.
Paw
Patrol, Dad, is that what you wear?
But yeah, that's there. So Daniel, my son, will be 7, and my daughter will be 4, or she just turned 4 in September, so 4.5. And they're young enough that they're not into any really of that stuff yet, but they see it and they know anytime that I tell them that I have to go to work, they're like, boring, because I'm not at home playing. So it's just, you got to go to boring work tomorrow. Yeah, I have to go to boring work. Yeah.
That's hilarious. How long's your wife been in the police force?
Ex-wife, but she's been there. Started as a dispatcher in 2016 or so. Has been on the road. So she kind of grew up around it as well. So for her, it was because of young as a family. Her mom is a police officer as well, so that was kind of what she knew what she wanted to do.
Path that was kind of set.
For me, I was the first in my family, so I saw it a different way. I didn't experience it the same, like we talked about earlier with is it a family thing that happens or not?
Right,
the first one. So.
Well, I imagine too, for a lot of, sorry, I'll let you go, David, is a lot of it too is similar to the military. Like for me, I didn't know what I was going to do after high school. I just knew I hated it.
Yeah.
So why was I going to subject myself to 4 more years of it?
Right.
So, the military is my way out. Maybe firefighting was something similar to you.
That's how I was. I did not do well in school. And then as soon as I went to the career center, I was making honor roll, and I was like, I'm so happy to be away from conventional school, and I'm ready to start working. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I did not have any. My desire, my goal was to be on a full-time fire department by age 21, and then totally derailed that plan. And then I ended up going back to school. But yeah, I was the same. I never had any desire through it. I'm like, don't want to do college. Want to get out of school.
Yeah,
That's
and
it.
I
And here
think people
am.
don't understand. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we need people like you guys
And
that are down
we
there
don't
doing.
stop educating ourselves.
Of course
We're
not.
constantly educating ourselves.
And you could
know.
always change your mind. You could always
Yeah.
go back.
Yeah.
I mean, I waited until I was working at a hospital system as a medic for a transport team, and that's when I was like, all right, then yeah, I'll go back and did my nursing. So I was well into adulthood and should have had my life together more than I did by that point. But it was an easy transition for me to be like, okay, I can go back to school.
I feel like now
don't
that
get me
kind of-
wrong. I've learned things the hard way.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've taken the hard route.
David, you had a question?
Yeah, it was answered. I was going to ask, why, but it's funny. I'm going to give you a big wah wah because it's like oh, I'm done with school, so I'm not doing that. And then you started, and you're like, oh shit, yeah, I'm going back to school.
Yeah, I could do
And then
something
now in your
else.
profession, it's constant training, so it's the continued education component. So
Yeah.
wah wah.
It is, but I think there's just something about the environment. Like, yes, there's parts of your job where you're in a classroom setting,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, but it also isn't just learning something to pass a class. It's learning something to help save a life or to make a difference or to streamline a process.
It's a practical learning type of thing. And that's where I think in my full-time job, I work with all of these fire departments and EMS agencies and do like medical education, continuing education. And that's why these guys love training, because it's not like I'm coming in and saying, okay, class, open your book to page 34. Like, it's stuff that it's how do you apply this on the next shift that you work? How do you make your next call run smoother because of XYZ? And our entire profession just loves that kind of stuff.
Now, I want to know, out of these two, which scenarios have you been like the most deadliest ever been in?
This is like the question that
Did you read that on? Did you ask Google what to ask a firefighter?
I just want to know because these guys got to have some good stories about the.
Oh, I do, and that's what I was going to use this last 20 minutes for.
yeah.
So that's great. We could start off with there. What's the deadliest scenario?
Yeah,
He's like everything with fire.
Firebird.
Yeah,
This
there's been
podcast.
some doozies. That's for
I
sure.
was just thinking fire, but I can also think of hazardous waste and stuff. That could be even twice as deadly because you can't use water. You have to use specialized foam and stuff to
Yeah.
put those
Oh,
things
that's a
out.
good example. I
We've
didn't
had
think
stuff
of
like that. I mean, we had a pretty significant hazmat incident in 2007. wasn't it?
yeah,
No, 2009. It was 2009, July 2009. It was a anhydrous ammonia truck that had
tanker. Yeah.
crashed, exploded. It was a propane-powered truck. It caused a large spill. It turned into like a 20-hour incident, and we had to evacuate people. First, we had to put out that fire, and then evacuate people, decon ourselves, set up a whole hazmat thing. So, yeah, there's stuff like that in the inner city. There's, plenty of dangerous things that occur, but you don't have to go to faraway places to encounter those incidents. I mean, they happen here regularly.
Yeah.
So
And like in our area, I think one of the scariest, most recent for me was power lines, down power lines. First of all, I hate anything electricity. Just never been a fan of it. And so, we get called routinely for tree on wires, especially with the storms, the high winds and stuff.
Yeah.
And so we still have to, we have to investigate it to a point so that we know, are we calling cable company? Are we calling power company? Whatever we're doing. So we were just kind of walking the edge of the road on the opposite side where it was down. We could see it was down. We could see that it was sparking, had some flame. And, we talk about routinely, again, our safety is priority. So we have to get our information, but we need to be safe first. And about 30 seconds after we made it to an area that still a safe enough distance, but the tree that was on the wire burned through, which caused the wire to then snap, which then caused an arc. It was like a flash of lightning, maybe 8 foot from us, loud bang. And, your brain just immediately goes back to like, what happened to that poor guy in Columbia Township, a Columbia Township firefighter, where there was a car accident in front of his house. He went to go help, didn't realize that there were down lines, or didn't see them, or thought that they were somewhere else, whatever the circumstance was, and it killed him. And that's the kind of stuff that, like, when we train and we do this, we are so cautious about how we approach things, how we handle things, because any of that could happen at any minute.
Yeah,
So
you can't look at things as routine, because that's when something not routine.
and in the
can
public's
happen.
eyes, it can often look like we're not doing anything.
Right.
But in reality, it's like, well, no, sometimes doing nothing is the right thing to do until, all I might do is close that road off so that nobody goes that way until the power company can shut the power off.
Right.
Because
That's all you can
otherwise,
do.
somebody dies,
Right.
and again, then you deal with the frustration from the public. Well, I just live right down there.
Yeah.
I know you do.
Is it really worth risking getting there a couple hours early?
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's just that, again, we have to be aware of so many different types of things that could happen.
Yeah,
whether
we
it's-
fix all problems. You call us and we fix all problems, whatever it is. We respond to them. So it's a lot on the table.
Here's a weird question that it just kind of popped into my mind here. AI.
This is great.
Yeah, AI. Because AI is impacting a lot of industries. How do you see AI
It's a really good question.
getting into fire and emergency services?
Well, we're already seeing it with our reporting systems. The one reporting system that we use, because we document every call that we go on extensively. They're using their own AI system that they're going to start implementing, and it's only going to help streamline our reporting process so that we can input a lot of good data. Because at the end of the year, we need to be able to pull all that data, give it to our township officials, and say, hey, this is how many calls we went on this year, blah, 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 blah. Here's all of our statistics. But AI can just help streamline that process, I think.
Also, for the training aspect, there's a lot of increased training that comes out of it. With, before it was, okay, if you had this, then what would you do? And they have a lot of different softwares and programs that can now create these scenarios, and then it's okay, how would you respond to it? So I think about like command trainers, for instance. They can, instead of having to kind of learn by being at an incident, they can put an incident in front of you. They can make it change, make it mold to your answers and how things, based on your actions, the next few things are going to happen. And so it kind of helps to prepare you in a setting that doesn't involve actual risk to human life or even to property.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that the other cool part about it is like the disaster planning piece, disaster planning and response, because a lot of what we need to do is prepare for how we're going to respond to things. So if we have a factory that has XYZ chemical, I think the use of that to say, okay, and it's already kind of in place, but the use of that to say, if this were to get heated and explode, how far out's the blast zone? How far out do we need to evacuate? We have mapping software and stuff like that's already being used. So it's incredibly helpful, more so than, a paper map. And it's like, draw this area.
Yeah.
And I don't even know in the dispatching aspect of things. I'm sure there's AI that can be utilized in that.
Taking calls and stuff like
Yes,
that to a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure.
Filtering them at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys both kind of said something though regarding like scenarios and stuff like that and putting together SOPs and whatnot. I just recently went through an AI training actually to help on basically how to approach certain companies, security companies, for what I do. And one of the, you could dive deep as you want, and you can say, okay, in this scenario, da 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 da, give me 3 different plans of action. All right, what's the positive and negatives of each plan of action? Which percentage is which one's higher likeliness of success, with a team of 20-year-olds versus a team of 30-year-olds, and it'll continue to go as deep as you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that's the power of AI, because obviously it has the power of all the information in the world to maximize and utilize and create plans and stuff. So I think there's a place for it for everything. I don't think they're going to be sending AI robotic firefighters.
Yeah, I think
in
maybe we
anytime
start
soon.
taking pictures of the fires and then seeing like, hey, what's the best way to put this out?
Well, I mean, that's a very.
And I think you have to tiptoe in
Yeah,
our
of
profession
course.
because there's 2 things that firemen hate. It's change in the way things are.
Sure.
So, you throw a whole bunch of AI stuff on on fire departments are just going to shit on it and be
I
like,
agree.
like, we don't need to do this. And to an extent, I mean, keeping our job simple, the way that we approach things is incredibly helpful, because let's not overcomplicate what we're trying to accomplish here too. You know,
And-
if it starts taking away from the goal, then is it worth it? You know, is it
But
not?
didn't you see that they now have electric powered fire trucks?
Yes, yeah. Well, I think that's a fad, but
I definitely think it's a fad.
No, is it true?
What are you gonna do? You hate electricity. Screw you guys. I'm walking.
Yeah, I'll meet you there.
Have you ever had to deal with any like Teslas exploding or anything like that, or like
Not yet.
electrical fires?
Yeah,
'Cause
but
I
we've
heard-
trained on it.
I haven't personally, but there are a lot of specialized classes.
Yeah, that's what I
There
heard.
are-
Because you gotta,
yeah.
don't you have to let them burn or something because
Yeah,
of the
there's
fires?
Pretty much, yeah.
Jeez.
Well,
Actually,
not only-
speaking of, there are specific applications that, based on all of the different electric cars and where things are and what, because vehicle electrification is another specialized something that we train in, and having kind of a guidebook to say, okay, where are the batteries at, where are the no cut zones, all of those things. So they do actually have that stuff already available. That like it's a resource for us, because we can't possibly remember all of.
Well, yeah, and that's actually a great point, because when I used to run dealerships, so Toyota was the Prius, right? And we used to talk about like, well, shit, what's the approach to like the jaws of life on a
Yeah,
fucking
don't cut
Prius?
that.
Yeah,
It'll kill you.
And you're right. Like you would have to have that knowledge readily available, because you just hear accident, right? You don't hear anything until you get there, and then you're like, oh fuck, it's an electric car. Fucking yuppie.
Yeah.
God damn it.
And then it's like, then again, our job remains the same: get the person out, do whatever we need to do. So we have to mold to everything else that's going on around it.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. That's definitely the adaptation that has to happen in some of these different scenes. I can imagine is intense.
And honestly, they don't crash very often. I mean, they have crash detection mechanisms in them, and I haven't seen too many of them getting in major accidents. So that's a good thing too.
Well, maybe it'll
There's
just
AI
be
at
like a
work.
car that's like not a human, and it went to go get the groceries, and like you're like, oh, I don't got to rescue anybody.
So quick plug for one of the other things I'm doing next week is, have you guys heard of this company called Waymo? So Waymo is what's going to replace Uber. So they're operating. When I was out in Phoenix over the summertime, I encountered one of these, but they're literally taxis with no drivers. The car drives completely autonomously.
Yeah.
And they ironically, there's a video of one that got caught on fire too, but that's another topic. But so this is out there. It was originally started by Google, and then they branched off. But you download the app and it comes and picks you up. So while
Which
I'm
sounds phenomenal, honestly, because sometimes you get in and like the conversation's just not there. They're like a socially awkward person, or like,
Or
so
even
I'd rather
worse.
just ride in silence.
even
Yeah.
worse,
I'd love to get a ride to work every single day. You know, like if I had one of those cars, that'd be great.
or what's worse is they do want to talk to you, but you're
Right.
not really in the mood to talk to them,
Yeah.
or they do want to assault you in some way, and you
Yeah,
don't want them to
safety.
assault you in some way.
Try and keep track on time. PTSD. I know from the military side of things, it's super looked at now versus 20 years ago when I got out. But how is that something that the forces kind of take into consideration? Especially, like I said today, I think every person there that was in the water was like 22, 25. Like there are some young kids there today, like, and they don't even know what it is.
Right. They haven't been exposed to going on a call and having a drowning.
Right.
A kid drowning and that type of thing.
Yeah, it's
But-
fun today. Everybody wins.
Yeah. I mean, Brad can speak on it a lot because he's helped start a huge program here in the county. So
Really?
Yeah, we could spend an entire other episode talking about it, and it would be awesome
For sure.
But we started in the county a county first responder peer support team, and when Danny and I both started, kind of the mentality was like, oh, you had a rough call, put your boots on, get on the next one, and it was kind of like nobody talked to us about how do we handle this when I go home? Why is it still playing in my head? Why am I still thinking about it? Everything that I see, smell, hear, whatever reminds me of it. You
How I
kind of
react
have
to certain
that.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why am I waking up in the middle of the night sweating, or my heart's racing, whatever? And so the stigma was huge, and there was also, we're not in professions that allow that kind of, hey, I don't really know what we think about this. It was always viewed as weakness,
Yeah.
you know,
Sure.
for a long time. And Dave can speak to it too. It was a weakness. It was vulnerability. And then if it was like, hey, he said he didn't know how, and like, nah, he's real weak. I don't want him in the car with me next time. Cause then what happens if it's gonna,
Right.
you know, gonna count on him, whatever. And so
Right.
there was just this huge stigma around it. And so, then unfortunately what happened is that law enforcement, fire, EMS, those professions are actually more likely to die by suicide than in the line of duty. And so that started happening. And then it was like, hey, why is this happening? And then when they looked back at, you know, they did studies on it and they were like, oh, it's because they had responded to so many of these incidents, you know. And you look at a typical civilian gets exposed to about 3 or 4 traumatic events in their life. And trauma is a spectrum, right? So what's traumatic to you might not be to me and vice versa. So a typical civilian sees about 4 traumatic incidents, whether that's a grandparent that they saw deceased or whatever it could be. They witnessed a car accident. First responders see, depending on their career, where they live, where they work and stuff like that, about 800 through the course of their career. So that's 800 times where it's like, it has the potential to affect you, you know? And so one of the things that we started doing and focusing on, and I by no means started this in our area alone. We have a team of people who came together and said, hey, we recognize this as an issue, but our peer support component is a huge deal. So it's basically making it normal to talk about, hey, it's okay that this stuff bothers you. It's okay that you had this call that like it hits you in the gut a little more. Again, we look at, like you said, a lot of those guys out there today, 20 or under, you know, these people are getting started at 18 years old. And then the next week they're going to somebody who shot themselves in the head, or they're going to somebody whose child stopped breathing or whatever else. So how do you not expect that to bother an 18-year-old when it's like they kind of just learned they don't even write cursive anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like all of us are human, and we just kind of focus on it's allowed to bother you. It's normal that it bothers you. And what's important is that you're resilient from it and that you talk to somebody about it. So our team is made up of 41 members, law enforcement, fire, EMS, dispatch, corrections, who are all trained in both individual crisis as well as group crisis intervention. So whether it's, hey, I had a rough one, I just need to talk to somebody, we can get you in touch with a peer supporter, somebody to talk to. We have different ranks because the things that a chief goes through are different than a thing that a new guy goes through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we do rank, we do discipline. Years on is another big thing because for me as a new person coming on, I could hear from somebody who's got 20 years on. I could hear from somebody with a year on, and if they say, yeah, I've been through this, I understand this is how I felt too, then it kind of makes you feel a little less like a big whiny baby about it, and you're like, okay. So
Yeah,
it wasn't
We're all
just
human,
me, right?
You know,
Yeah.
no matter what your age and how many times you've had to deal with something. So, and you know, it can just get you on the wrong day, wrong time. So that's why you have to take a nice active and an active role in being an advocate for yourself and reaching out when you need to. And we do a good job internally tracking that stuff. So if like we get specific incidents, like we activate the team right away. Well, let's get them out here. Let's talk to these guys. Let's make sure everybody's good. We also track the calls themselves. So when people are putting the calls in the reporting software, they mark critical incident, like, hey, this guy's been on like 10 of these type of calls in the past like 2
So you're more
months.
proactive.
Yeah.
Rather
So,
than
like,
letting
we're
them
keeping
come
an
to
eye,
you,
like-
you can kind of be like, hey, maybe we should pull this
Yeah.
guy aside, just see how
Yep.
he's doing type thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's really what the more of these programs are becoming is proactive. Like,
Yeah. Which is great. I mean,
it is, because not every, like you said, you know, especially in your guys' field, like we're men, like, and most of us, I know women
Yeah.
obviously in it too, but like it's a tough profession. You're expected to be tough. There is the whole, you know, throw dirt on it mentality and rub, you know, and you still want that to some degree, but
Yeah.
you also need to know when enough is enough.
right.
You know, because
Yeah, you can't have somebody coming into work who's bawling their eyes out at shift change, you know, because they got something going on. It's like, you know, we got to get this guy right, this guy or girl right, you know, resilient, back to their normal self before we can, you know, start using them again.
and it's a circle of life in a sense too. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie American Sniper.
Yeah.
I just saw that the other day, but there's a scenario at the end of the movie where like he like is about to kill his dog because he's like wrestling with this kid and he has that protection, like need to do something. But when it comes to these different things, it's not only how it affects our head and how it affects how we react to things physically or mentally, but that also then puts stress on our marriage, which then puts stress on us at the job. Like I'm sure you guys, we used to say, put it in a bag, leave it at the curb when you get here, but that's not always possible. So these actions happen at work. They're quiet at home. Their spouse doesn't understand. They see themselves just standing there doing nothing for hours at a time because they're locked into their brain. Now the wife's mad. The kids don't understand why you're not doing stuff. And then you're at work the next day and you get called on a fire and your wife's mad at you because you just had an argument before you left.
Right.
Like that whole circle is really brutal.
There's a guy by the name of Kevin Gilmartin, and he has a book, and it's called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, and it really is applicable to any first responder, military as well. And he talks a lot about just that. And it's we look at the person. It's not about like, hey, we go to work, we do these things, and then we leave. We also have everything else that goes on the backside, and I mentioned my ex-wife, who we get along very well now. But both of us together will admit that we didn't have the view that we did now during our marriage. And she was in law enforcement. I was doing this, like that 100% took a toll on, we were both present in other spots. And you really have to look at yourself. And I sat through Kevin Gilmartin's presentation 2 years ago when we had him in Medina, and he's coming back actually in March. But I sat through it and I'm like, man, I wish I would have had that in the beginning of my career, because you don't think about it. Everybody, you graduate school, you get your certifications, you finish, and what do you want to do? You want to save the frickin' world, right? You want to do everything that you can. You want to help as many people as you can. I want to be there anytime that I need to be. And I was 100% guilty of that. Like, you have to have that time where you set it and prioritize yourself. And that's what our team really helps to focus people on, is like, we don't want to discourage you from coming around as much as we need you, because we need you. But we want you to realize, if you don't put yourself first, one of the guys early on in our training said a career in public safety is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And if you want to make it that 25 years, if you want to make it your entire career, you have to take care of yourself enough and do it in a way that you can make it happen the entire time. Otherwise, you're going to come in balls to the wall and you're not going to make it.
Yeah. Everybody's got their own process, and you got to find what your process is, and you got to stick to it. I mean, you have a duty to do it to other people around you. And that's no different. It's not just to people in public safety. I think that's everybody,
Absolutely.
That's right along the lines of you talked about this earlier, from a physical perspective, and then now what we've learned is the mental perspective. So the self-care element is it's critical. Most law enforcement academies didn't start teaching anything about self-care until about 5 years ago, because I was part of the Rub Some Dirt on It group myself.
Generation
Gen Xers. Just a quick plug. I know we're getting ready to wrap, but for everybody out there that's not a first responder or doesn't know where to go looking for resources for self-care or help, we do have a sponsor for this, Online Therapy, so we'll put the link in the description.
The link will be in the description. It's on the website as well.
Yeah, you get the same discount that we have access to. So,
and I would love to have you talk more about that program. I have a couple of people that are on that team with you, and just do an episode just on that. We've actually got a counselor I've been talking to. He's out of state, but would love to be on. He handles PTSD for the military now.
Awesome.
So I do think that's a topic that could go on for hours, right?
Yeah.
Last question, because we're running short on time. A scenario, do you recall at any point in your time where there's a time you thought about just stopping what you were doing, whether it was one of these trauma instances or it was one of the, has there ever been a point where you're like, I can't handle this anymore, and then you got over it? Or
it still happens.
Yeah,
it still happens. And it's just one of those things. It's like, okay, take a step back, collect your thoughts, and start anew, because it's continually regenerative in this profession, because it's not going to stop coming. You just have to get tougher. You have to get better and be better able to deal with it.
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, it's routine with not only a specific incident, but different changes and things that we have where it kind of is like you just kind of feel the weight of everything else around you kind of pushing you and pushing you and pushing you. I'll say my first was the guy that got me started in it all. He was actually my youth pastor at my church who was on the fire department and started the Explorers program. And he would, and I were very close. He was like a second dad to me. It was a kind of like, hey, yeah, come see the fire station. While we were there, we got a call. They let me go on it. And I was like, this is what I want to do.
Right.
And he passed away in 2008. So having that, like, he was the guy that I wanted to be like and wanted to work with, and Danny knew him, worked with him, and like that was kind of the first time for me that I was like, all right, is this really it?
Right.
And then like you said, I stuck around, and every incident bothers you in a different way, whether it's frustration with the one another, whether it's frustration the severity of the incident, or the other crazy topic that again we could spend hours on is the moral dilemma. There's a moral injury piece of bad things shouldn't happen to certain people. Bad things shouldn't happen to kids. Bad things shouldn't happen to the old people that are abused, or, we shouldn't have to witness that stuff. And it is a routine kind of like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, I can imagine.
But the fulfillment, certainly again, when you can kind of rephrase your mind and center yourself again, it makes it worth it.
And I think that's not just public safety. Like if you're average citizen and something bad happens in your life, what are you going to run from it? You have to know, I need to learn how to deal with this and get better so that I can deal with even more, because more is coming.
Yeah, of course.
It's
always coming. It doesn't stop.
No. So yeah, you just have to fortify yourself.
All right. You guys got anything else?
No, I know we're up against a hard stop. Really appreciate
Yeah, I
it.
could go on
guys,
for another hour easy.
yeah.
It's been awesome having you guys on.
I've known both these guys for several years now, and I'm glad we connected up today to do what we did.
And we'll
Yeah,
definitely have you guys on for sure. Appreciate you guys being here.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank
All
you.
right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Nothing off limits, we got something to say. Life and love, fitness and fight all day. Guys Night Podcast, let's ride the wave.